kind of want to go back to another point you were talking
Yeah.
about neurodiversity.
Yes.
So there's this cognitive diversity when it comes to listening too that people don't understand. We all have, I like to use the term, there are three terms that I'll use interchangeably. Listening habits, listening strainers, like a spaghetti strainer, right, or a
Okay.
pasta strainer, or listening filters, right? So all three of those are the same
Filter,
things.
strainer,
And habit. So
habit.
think of anything that allows some stuff through, but not everything through,
Okay.
right? And that's
Okay.
how we listen. We don't pick up everything that's coming at us. We listen to and for different information. We don't know this part yet, but I suspect it's based on our values. So there are 4 listening habits that people can have. And when you narrow it down to 4, it's so easy to see. So the
Yeah.
first is a connective listener. So a connective listener listens to and for information that affect the people and the emotions of the people. So they're just interested in the people aspect of whatever is being talked about. And even in the absence of that message having people in it, they're thinking, how is this going to affect the people?
Yeah.
So oftentimes, people in HR, when you heard about different policies, when you were in HR, you automatically went, oh, how are the people going to respond to this, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're thinking, you're processing, you're listening connectively there. The second kind is reflective, and reflective is interesting because a reflective listener listens to the incoming information in an attempt to match it to his or their past experiences.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a computer processor. Do I have any
Mm.
background in this information?
Do I recognize this? Where did I see? Okay.
Yeah, because oftentimes, and I know that you've done this, I do this,
Uh-huh.
all of us do it. Like when we hear a word we don't understand, we just let that one go through our filter, right? We're not going to stop. But it could be the most important word in the sentence, right? But it just goes away. So the reflective listener listens to match things to past experience so they can add value by saying, well, when we tried this before, this is what happened, or we should have done it that way. What's interesting about the reflective listener is they often look like they're not listening. So they're the ones in your meetings who are kind of leaned back, maybe the arms are crossed, they're staring off at the horizon. And I think that's because eye contact is just another stimuli that is too much to process. So they're really listening to what's going on, even though they don't look like they're listening because they don't have those social norms of listening.
Mm-hmm.
And they oftentimes won't talk in meetings, but the next day they'll come in and they have the best thought out plan, that incorporates everything.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, where were you yesterday? Right? So that's a reflective listener. And then we have the analytical habit, and the analytical habit listens for the details and the facts and the credibility.
Okay.
Exactly how much money is in that budget?
Uh-huh.
You said we could have her 25% of the time. How many hours a week is that really going to be? What's the deadline? So all of those kinds of questions, because if you can't answer that question right now, I can't listen to anything else because I haven't had my question answered, right? So that's the analytical listener.
Okay.
And then you've got the conceptual listener who is really only interested, I shouldn't say only, but interested primarily in the big idea. Because the realities of today aren't anywhere near as fun and exciting as the possibilities of the future. So they're taking the big idea of today and trying to apply it to the future. And what if we switch it this way? What if we do it that way? So when you recognize that each of us is listening from one of those 4 places, or maybe 2 of those 4 places, it really helps explain why we walk out of meetings with totally different ideas of what went on in that meeting.
Yeah.
Because we're listening to and for different information because of our listening habits. So the other thing is that the word habit there is really important. Listening is a habit, which means it's like any other habit we have. We've learned how to do it, probably without any training. We don't even understand that there are other ways to do it. But if we can get trained into doing it differently, we can do it differently. So it's not tied to our personality. So you know how like the DISC assessment and the Myers-Briggs, those are personality traits. And I'm not saying anything bad about those instruments because they certainly have their place. I think the difficulty with that is we can't change our personalities. We might be able to manage them for a little bit of time. I'm an extrovert, right? So I'm never going to become an introvert. I just am not. And introverts aren't going to become extroverts.
Right.
They can pretend to be extroverts and for 2 hours,
Right.
but then they get exhausted. But listening is a habit. And so like any other habit, once we learn how to do it differently, we have to practice doing it differently.
Yeah.
And it really, it hurts our brain at first to do it differently. But once we do it differently, we can catch so much more of that incoming information.
Yeah. All those tools, you start with the breathing, settling into what you're about to listen to, which might be traumatic. And then that takes habit. You went through yoga and then listening. It takes training. It's another form of a muscle. You gotta train it a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That makes it feel less like I'm bad.
Yeah.
It makes it feel like you just got something to work towards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, listening has become intentional.
Yeah.
And when I say that, it doesn't mean that I am intentional 100% of the time when I listen, right? Ask my partner, right? That I am not 100% of the time. But when I know something is at stake or something is really important, then I try to go, wait a minute, what's your intention here, right?
Yeah.
You got to listen for this.
Yeah.